Now, this approach of overriding the animations in the child blueprint works rather well, but it does have one or two drawbacks. First of all, as you can see here, the original is play stand the prone. And over here is our option to override it. We're not going to override it. We want to play that animation. But this is the name of the original animation, so it's not as user-friendly as you might like it to be. In other words, if the animation had a more long, complicated name, or if you had, say, placeholder animations that were kind of filling in slots that weren't really assigned correctly, then it may not be as intuitive to understand what this slot actually is. Like, it would be handy if you could rename this as, stand the prone slot, and then that would be its name regardless of what animation it was playing. Another potential issue with this, and we don't have an example here in our Anim graph, but this is basically overriding every instance of the animation that is called. Well, what happens if, for example, we are using this blend space in multiple nodes? As you can see here, each one of these is a node in either the main Anim graph or in one of the states in the state machine. For example, here's our standing death, but what if we had played the exact same animation in our crouching death? So then we would have to reset them in two spots at once. It would be way more convenient if we just had a table or something to set at once. Fortunately, there is an ability to do that. If we right click, if I right click and under Blueprints, I go to Structure, and we will call this an Anim struct. And I'm not going to go through every single one, but so right now we have member var 0 and we have it set as a boolean. Well, let's change that from a boolean to an Anim. Let's see, was it an Anim instance? Anim sequence, that's what we needed. And so we can change that to what should we call that? Let's start with, actually let's close this one. Let's go back to the original. Movement iron sights. And actually what we can do, just to make sure we got it right, let's go to details. Notice here it has an option as pin. So right now it's playing the one that's assigned to it. Let's select as pin, and let's drag that off, and just real quick promote the variable, and we can see that that's not an Anim instance. That is a, what does it say that is? That is a blend space. So let's undo that. Let's delete that. Just delete it here. And let's go back here and let's change that to a let's just call it a blend space. Let's see if that works. And then we will call this movement. Call that movement. So right now it's set to none. So we're seeing our hips additive and our iron sights additive. We're not seeing our movement additive. So let's change that type to blend space base. There we go. Now we have our movement iron sights BS. So that should work. So just to illustrate the point, and again I'm not going to go through every single one, but now what we can do is we can go to our player character. We can add a variable, and that variable will be of type Anim struct, because we just created that. So we got to compile that before we can see the variables. Now underneath here, under movement, we can right click that, and we can add our movement iron sights BS. We'll save that. So now here under our test anim, let's go to the event graph, and what we're going to do is we're going to, just like we've done with all these other variables, we're going to create our own. And we won't do this on the update animation. That would be very redundant. What we want to do is we want to create a new event, and that is event blueprint initialize animation. So we're going to create a new variable here, and again we're going to make this an anim struct. And we will call this animation struct AB. And we're going to set that, and of course we're going to set that by, we're going to get the player pawn, and we're going to cast. Let's go. Let's see. We'll call it player character BP. Let me just maximize this. And then what we'll do is we will get our animation struct, and then we will set it. Then if we go back over to our navigation here where we have that set, we're going to get our animation struct. Now remember, we've only added one entry to this struct, but the struct will actually hold a whole list of things. Let me just sort of add a few more things just to illustrate that point. Let's go back to our anim struct, and let's create a new variable, and we'll call this just call it aim. And if you remember, that actually showed up as a blend space. The more specific we name it, the less likely we're going to plug in something by accident. And you can see here, here's our hips additive and our iron sights additive.